We have 47 people.
Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Solar PV Training Program Applications for Cities and Counties. Our speaker today is Jenny Heater, a Senior Energy Analyst in the National Renewable Energy Lab. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how you can participate in today's event. You're listening in using your computer's speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio panel of your control panel, and the dial-in information will be displayed. You'll have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the question pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. We will be recording today's webinar. You will receive a follow-up email within about 2 weeks with a link to view the recording. And now I'll turn it over to Jenny Heater.
Great, thanks. We're really excited to have everyone join us today to review our new solar training program for cities and counties. You can head to the next slide. So this program is coming out of a lot of increasing activity by state and local governments. We know that commitments to renewable energy are increasing, whether through one of these formal campaigns or through more informal city setting of carbon or renewable energy goals. So for folks on the phone, you may be participating in one of these agreements. If you're not, you may have your own perspective on how much solar or renewable energy or carbon reductions you'd like for your community. So next slide. NREL has done a little bit of work trying to understand which types of communities might be pursuing expanded renewable energy commitments. This map here shows an index that's based on a couple of indicators for communities that we think would be likely to introduce a renewable energy target. That's not to say that communities who scored low on the index would not set a target, but based on some indicators, they would be less likely to. And so some of the metrics we looked at for cities who are making these types of commitments include the ASHE STARS universities. So those are universities who have signed up to go through a sustainability protocol and rating system. The number of businesses with renewable energy goals, whether that's being a formal part of EPA's Green Power Partnership or some other formal commitment like a signed PPA. And we also looked at some state policy indicators. So Union of Concerned Scientists has a report looking at state by state how state policies rank in terms of clean energy support. There are also state RPSs, the solar resource in the state, as well as the ability in the state to sign a PPA for on-site generation. In addition, we examined the education level and census population to see if factors like that may be at play. So you can see based on this indicative map that there's a lot of potential for cities and counties to make higher renewable energy targets. Next slide. And we know that NREL has a lot of resources along with DOE to help cities and counties meet their renewable targets, but you may not know how to use these tools or which tools even to start with. So we do have some tools listed here. System Advisor looks at how we can assess solar potential and solar economics for individual projects. The Renewable Energy Optimization, REOPT, and the new REOPT Lite public version allow you to customize solar and storage, as well as solar and storage separately. The State and Local Energy Data Platform, which is on a DOE platform, allows you to see energy use in your community. And the Urban Renewable Building and Neighborhood Optimization allows you to optimize energy use on a district level. So we have all of these tools, next slide, and even more tools than are listed here. But what we wanted to do was make a program that's more specific to the needs of a city or county representative who's trying to help their government lead by example. So our program really will be targeted to cities and counties who are interested in building solar on their land or facilities. And this slide is just a high-level overview of the program. I'll go into more detail later as well, but we did want to focus on having a short application. So it is a 2-page application that I'll provide the questions later. But it is designed to be short because we know folks are busy and you don't want to spend too much time just applying for the program. We're planning to work with 50 cities or counties, and we also have some room in the program for NGO participants who may be working with groups of cities or have some relationships with cities where they could be trained and then pass along the information. Our process for this training program is that it will be a virtual program, and we'll have a learning management system where our participants will be able to log in and view our training content, and then after viewing some content, have some open office hours with NREL subject matter experts. After viewing all of the training material and going through a number of different courses, there is some room in the program to answer specific questions that the city or county staff may have. So we're planning about 5 hours of one-on-one technical assistance from the NREL expert to the city or county staff. Another piece of this program is that we want to make sure everybody that we're training is prepared to share their knowledge and inspire others. So I'll talk about this later, but we would like that everybody who goes through the training to train 5 other city or county staff so that the knowledge we impart on you guys does not just end there. And as I mentioned, one of the focuses of the program is to make sure that our NREL subject matter experts are sharing their knowledge throughout this process. So to kick it off, we have our first polling question to see who actually is on the webinar.
Okay, so we're going to launch our first poll. The question is who's on the webinar, and we'd like you to select which category you represent, the first being city or county government, then state or tribal government, NGO or consultant working with cities, or other. So please select the appropriate response and click submit.
Looks like we're getting a lot of responses in.
We have about 88% of you have responded, so if those of you who have not yet responded could go ahead and submit your responses, and we'll close the poll in a few moments. Okay, we are now closing the poll, and let me share the results with you. It looks like 76% of you are city or county government, 3% state or tribal, 8% NGO or consultant working with cities, and 13% other.
Great. So it sounds like most of you are city or county government folks, which is great. We can move on to the next slide. Everybody who is working at a city or county is eligible for the program of any size municipal government. We're also opening the process to any contract staff working with the city or county. So that may include some of you in that consultant bucket or the NGO bucket. We've had an inquiry about whether school district staff would be eligible, and we are opening the program to school district staff as well. In addition, city or county-owned affordable housing staff would be eligible. We do have a few state or tribal folks on the line. So for you guys, we actually, DOE already has programs for you. So I would encourage you to check out those programs. The links are provided here, and these slides will be sent out to you. So there is a very in-depth technical assistance program for tribes that covers some of the same material we are planning to cover, but also goes into wind or biomass or other renewable energy resources, and talks about off-site as well as on-site applications. And then there's a separate program for state government as well, so the link is there below. Great, I think we're ready to move on to our second question.
Okay, so our second question that will come up here in a moment is, do you have a specific solar project that you need help with moving forward? So go ahead and select From the responses, 1 is no, but leadership is interested. 2 is no, but I want to propose a project to leadership. 3 is yes, and I know what I need to get a project approved. And 4 is yes, but I don't know where to start. Okay, we have about 80% of you have put in responses. Those of you who have not, go ahead and submit your responses, and we'll close the poll in a few moments. Okay, we're closing the poll now, and let me share the results with everyone. It looks like 55% of you said no, but leadership is interested. 15% said no, but I want to propose a project to leadership. 14% said yes, and I know what I need to get started. And 4% said yes, but I don't know where to start.
Great. So it sounds like a lot of folks online have leadership interested, which is excellent. You can move on to the next slide. Yeah, so for those who maybe are struggling with where to start and want to learn what this program will cover, I wanted to talk about some of the key pieces of training that we'll cover. And we're planning to introduce each of these topics through an online module with time after to talk with NREL experts. So the first piece that we know folks need understanding of is just framing your goals and team. So your team, includes who you might need to talk to from your finance organization, from your legal organization. Who do you need to have involved in this process? And the second piece of that is framing your goals. So some cities may already have a megawatt capacity goal. Some cities may just want, have to have some sort of financial benchmark where if a project hits a certain rate of return or is a certain level below existing utility rates, they will move forward. So the first piece is understanding what your goals are and who you need to have involved in the process. The second piece is what we call site identification and screening. So this is a high-level understanding of how much PV you could install on your buildings and land, and it's using some of our NREL tools as well as learning from our experts about how to understand which sites may be feasible. And then the second piece to that is really the project validation and permitting. So maybe you have a building that you could put solar on. You really need to then validate the project, looking at the very granular details of your utility rates, your structure for how you might pay for PV and things like that. The fourth component is focused on project economics and financing. So we found that many universities who we worked with previously were interested in signing a power purchase agreement rather than providing upfront capital for a project. This module will help folks understand what are the trade-offs between different types of financing options, as well as how state and local policies and utility policies may affect their project economics and size of system and things like that. The last piece we'll provide some training on is PV RFPs. So your city may have a formal request for proposal process, and you may have even issued an RFP for solar in the past. We would provide some guidance on how to issue an RFP for PV, what are some of the most important aspects to write into that RFP so that when you get proposals back, you can properly evaluate them and you know that the project you select will be a good one for your city or county. Next slide. So those are the types of content that we'll be covering and what we hope you will learn. How you will learn will be, as I mentioned before, primarily virtually. We are developing some in-person training options, but haven't fully figured out what that may look like. We are working with the U.S. EPA's Green Power Partnership, and they would like to do some regional meetings or things like that to convene cities who may be clustered in a specific region. But if you are selected for assistance, there will be no requirement that you attend training in person. And we will be developing a combination of video trainings, worksheets, and opportunities for Q&A, so that even though you're virtual, we hope that you will be fully connected to our training program. And after completing the training series, we know that you may still have additional questions. You may have questions that are very specific to your project. So we will connect you with an NREL staff person to answer any additional questions at that time. So you may be wondering what's in the application. How do I apply, and what do I need to compile in order to complete the application? And we will provide a link to the application as well at the end of this webinar. But I just wanted to walk through the questions. First question we had is, do you have a renewable energy or solar target? We are hoping to work with cities and counties who have already made some commitment, whether that's through a formal resolution or signing on to an agreement, or maybe it's just an informal commitment by your mayor or city council or facilities managers to move forward with a certain level of renewable energy or solar. The second question we had is whether you are involved with a council of governments or other regional entity working on electricity issues. We know that a lot of cities may not have a ton of staff people to be investigating these topics, but there are some regional organizations who are working to collaborate with each other. And when we see those regional organizations as a great way for city folks or county folks that we train to share their message. The third question is just how far along are you in your solar deployment? So how many kilowatts of solar does your community currently have for its government facilities? And then we're also looking for some data on your electricity consumption, who your electric utility is, and the rate structure of your utility. That can help us understand, what are some of the high-level dynamics going on in terms of how much you pay for electricity and how much you might get credited based on a net metering regime. And also, it's just great information for you to have. So if you don't have that information already, hopefully it will be pretty easy for you to figure out and let us know on the application. Another piece we're looking for is your sense of how much space you have for solar deployment on your facilities, both rooftop and ground mount. We know that you may not have done a full assessment, and that will be part of our training process, but we want to make sure that you have at least some sense that there is some space available on your rooftops, or you have a ground mount potential. One of the other questions is on your city approval structure. So we asked in the beginning of this webinar whether you felt like there were opportunities, or your leadership was supportive of solar. We'd just like to know if you feel like your approval structure, whether that's the mayor or city council, is likely to approve funds for PV on city-owned property. And then the last two questions are really just so we understand where you're coming from. We'd like to know how familiar you are with some of the topics we'll be covering, and that will help us design some of our training materials to focus on one area more than other. If we see, all of our participants really already know about solar financing, but they really don't understand how to do RFPs, we can customize some of our content based on those responses. And then lastly, as I mentioned, we do want folks that we train to train other people. So it is a requirement of the program that if we're selected, you will be sharing your knowledge on. And we will be providing some ways for you to do that. And hopefully it would not be a burden to you as a staff person, but really would help you work through your existing networks and connections to make sure what you've learned is not just stopping at you. So I think, yeah, that's all that's required. We'll post the link to the application later, but we can move on to our third polling question.
Okay, so our third and last polling question is, do you have support from leadership to build a solar array on city or county land? The options you have up on your screen are yes, but we need to develop a more solar expertise, develop more solar expertise and a plan? Yes, but I need to meet certain cost metrics. Or no, I need to present a financial analysis to leadership. Okay, looks like we have almost 70% of you have voted. The rest of you, if you could go ahead and submit your responses, we will close the poll in a few moments. Okay, we're now closing the poll, and let me share the results with everyone. 33% of you said yes, but we need to develop more solar expertise and a plan. 35% said yes, but I need to meet certain cost metrics. And 32% said no, but I need to present a financial analysis to leadership.
Great. So really interesting to see that really evenly split among the options. And I think the training that we're planning to provide will help folks in each of these buckets. So if you need to develop more solar expertise and a plan, we can help you do that. The second and third options really are dealing with the cost of the project, and we will help folks figure that out as well. So the last piece I wanted to cover was really how we'll make selections, and this can help you frame your application and responses to the application. So one thing that we are looking at is whether there is a renewable energy or solar deployment in place already, either formal or informal, whether you have available rooftop land or land for a ground-mounted system, just because if you don't have any land or rooftops available, we won't be able to help you. The third piece is that interest by government officials in providing funds or signing a contract for PV. Well, we also want to balance our selectees regionally and in terms of size of the city. So we want to make sure that we're not just helping 50 cities in Illinois or 50 cities who are all very small cities. We'll be balancing both of those items. And then the last piece, as I mentioned, is the ability or commitment for the selectee to pay it forward to 5 local governments, or that could be a housing authority or school interested in expanding solar. So next slide. The applications are due Friday, November 17th. That is coming up pretty quickly here, but since it is just a 2-page application, we're hoping folks can get those in pretty quickly. We are having folks email their completed application to Amy Hollander, who's here with me in the room today as well. And we will be making selections by December 11th, 2017. So given all of that, I think we have a few questions to answer. We also have my contact as well as Amy's contact here if you have questions as you're going through the application or questions about whether you should apply or should not apply. So now let's turn it to Amy to walk us through some questions.
Thank you, Jenny. Our first question today is the application solely for municipal operations, or does it include other developments such as community solar installations as well?
Yeah, great question. So our focus is for solar that is located on city buildings or land. It could also include city participation in a community solar array that may not be located on city land or buildings. But really our primary focus is on those buildings and land that the city controls. So we want to make sure that that potential is maximized to begin with.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have some other questions. If my application is approved, are we required to attend all the trainings?
So the trainings will be virtual. So attendance is, viewing that virtual training. We haven't fully thought through that, to be honest. We know that some cities may not need each of the training modules, but we are hoping they would be pretty short, an hour of content or so. So we can think through that, but I guess I would encourage you, if you have only one area where you need training, to note that in your application.
Thank you. Is there going to be a certification offered through the training?
Yeah, great question. We are exploring that right now, actually. Our hope is that we would be able to get continuing education credits approved for this program, so that you would be able to use those towards whatever professional development requirements you may have through a professional certification. I think we will be tracking and can track through our learning management system how many trainings you attended, and can share the results of that and document if you need that documentation about how much training you received, and if folks would like some sort of certification at the end of that says that they completed all the trainings, that would be easy to do.
Thank you. Regarding the training of 5 additional cities or counties, is this training to be funded by the applicant, or are there any resources to support the training that we are required to share with others?
Yeah, so we will be developing resources to help you share what you've learned with other cities and counties. One way that this could take shape is if your city or county participates in a regional organization that has an electricity committee or a sustainability committee, maybe it's you going to that committee and presenting for an hour on how to use NREL system advisor model. Or maybe it's you sharing the lessons that you learned from issuing a solar RFP with that group, as well as the RFP that your city developed. So definitely we don't want to make it difficult for you to share what you've learned, and we'll be thinking through as we go along this process if there are slide decks or other resources that we could develop to help that process be easy for you.
Great, thank you. We have some additional questions coming in. We have a small PV system on many municipal buildings with PPAs. Could we apply to expand and add systems to cover more of the building electrical loads?
Yes, definitely. Definitely, we are, wanting to work with folks, who may have sold a little bit of PV. Maybe you did it, 2 or 5 or 10 years ago, and need to get up to speed on how to scale your solar deployment, and up to speed on some of the new financial structures that may be available to you, or just understanding of the cost dynamics of solar, given that the costs have come down so much. So yes, please, as long as you have more room for solar, I would encourage you to apply to the program.
Great. Is there a solar thermal component as well?
Good question. So no, we do not have a solar thermal component. The program will be focusing just on solar PV.
And will battery storage be considered?
We are including storage in one of the training modules. So we are training folks on using NREL's React Lite platform, and that's a platform that just went live last month, I guess it was. And that does allow you to look at PV, battery, and then PV and battery together to understand how a battery may be able to help lower the cost of the overall system and provide some additional benefits. So we will be focusing on that to some degree, but we know that not all cities may be interested in doing that, and that there may be areas of the country where that's not a viable option.
Thank you. For county governments, can we use the training assistance for city buildings located in the county, or does it have to be just for county-owned facilities?
Can you say that again?
Yeah. So for county governments, can we use the training assistance for city buildings located in the county, or does it have to be just for county-owned facilities?
Okay, so if you are in a county government, I would encourage you to work with the cities that have control over their buildings and space, and have one of them be the point person. So have the person who can make the decision be part of the training program, just because it could get very complicated if the county person is running through the training and then the city person doesn't have any buy-in or in-depth understanding of the process. But that said, if there are still some buildings on city or on county or land or buildings where you could make it work, and then maybe you pay it forward to that city, that could work as well. So that's sort of a complicated question and a complicated answer, and if you'd like to know more or talk through that, give me a call or give Amy a call.
For those who haven't begun any analysis on rooftop availability, what do you suggest as a starting point for the application? And a follow-up to that question might be, if we haven't done any solar yet, will we still be approved?
Yeah, we'll take the second one first. If you haven't done any solar, that's totally fine. We'd encourage you to apply. The real screening criteria there is whether you are committed to moving forward with solar. In terms of understanding rooftop availability, at a high level, you might want to work with your facilities manager and just get an understanding of, how many square feet of building rooftops do you have, and if there is any sense from the building manager about whether those rooftops, may be already occupied by equipment or other things on the roof. You could also just do a high-level screen of, how old the roof may be. So if you have a lot of really new roofs or really old roofs, and think through some of those questions. But I would say, at a high level, don't spend a ton of time researching this just for this question and this response, but just get some basic data so we have a sense of, whether you may have one building or hundreds of buildings that are in your portfolio.
Thank you. So we have some questions regarding training, several questions on if we are awarded the training program, how many city or county employees can participate in the training?
Yeah, so we expect to have, one person at the city or county that's the lead, but then we would certainly encourage you to bring along any folks who may need to be involved in the process or get up to speed on certain components of the training. But we'd like to have, one point of contact at the city who's really the lead on sharing the information with your solar team. So what that could look like is maybe a sustainability manager is the lead and, attending all of the trainings, and then having some meetings with finance or legal or facilities to understand key components of how they move forward.
And also, what is the estimated amount of time commitment for the virtual training?
So we hope that it's not that much. We haven't documented the number of hours, but if you just think through, we'll have about 5 different modules, about an hour of training for each of those modules. Then we'll probably also have an hour of open office hour time to talk to an NREL staff person. So there you're looking at 10 hours. And then we also probably will have a little bit of time that we'd like you to maybe complete a homework assignment or pull together some data for your facilities. And that really can vary based on the size of your government, how much data has already been collected, how responsive your other folks are in your government. So that piece, I would say, could vary quite a bit, but we're hoping that the actual training piece is really short and easy to pay attention to, and gives you some really concrete actions to take.
And regarding the training, what kind of personnel would you recommend for the training? For example, do you recommend that we send engineers, or would a sustainability coordinator or facility manager be a good candidate for the training?
Yeah, so in terms of who is the lead on the city side, it really depends on how you're working with your team. When we trained universities, I would say typically the point of contact we had at the university was a sustainability manager or somebody in facilities or engineering, because typically those folks are either, very motivated to get the project done, and or they have knowledge and expertise about the buildings and facilities and utility data and things like that. So typically I would say it's one of those two types of people. But that said, if there's somebody who's on the finance side or on the legal side and you just really feel like this is, an area where you want to focus, we're open to that as well. So I definitely wouldn't let that constrain you. And one of the first module in our training will be talking about who you need to have on your team. So if there needs to be some flexibility there, we can sort through that as well.
And another question on the specifics of training. Are the trainings going to be focused on using existing NREL tools like SAM and REOPT Lite? Regardless, can you provide a preview or outline of the training content?
So first piece, they will be focused on existing NREL tools and resources, as well as some custom materials we'll be developing related to policy and incentives and things where we don't necessarily have a tool for it. In terms of the content sort of roadmap, I would say that is in the works right now. That's our job for the next 2 months, is to pull that all together. But the high-level pieces I did walk through on slide 9. So we will be walking through those processes of your goals and team, site identification and screening, project validation and permitting, project economics and financing, and then the solar RFPs. So those are the key areas, and then we'll be developing content within each of those. But if you have specific questions, I guess contact me or Amy about things you'd like to see included, or if you're have a great idea for something to include, definitely let us know.
So I have a scenario of somebody who's wondering if they would be a good applicant. This person is a deputy mayor of a city that has their own municipal electric utility. They have a brownfield large enough for a 2-megawatt solar field. The city and the utility are working together on this, looking at possible funding mechanisms and what we should put in our RFP. Are we a good candidate for this training program?
Yes, I think you'd be a great candidate. And I think this is going to be the case with a lot of our applicants, where you may already have your site selected. You may already know, where you're going to be, and already be working with your utility, whether that's a municipal or not. I think that the training pieces that we're developing around how to do an RFP and things like that would be very useful to this applicant. So I think, yeah, that's definitely a great fit. And we have been reaching out to some folks who have done work on brownfields already as well, and maybe done some site assessment of their brownfields. So we are hoping to get some applicants from folks like that who have maybe already done their site screening and site selection.
So kind of another scenario, our county feels comfortable with some of the financial analysis to prove project viability. However, would training include how a county or a city could increase local jobs through solar deployment?
That is not something we're planning to cover. I believe NREL has some tools for assessing jobs and economic development, although admittedly that's not my area of focus. But yeah, that would sort of be an extension of this, I think, if cities wanted to do some estimates of that on their own. But we're not planning to cover that as a core area.
Great. When does the training start and how long will it last?
Great question. So we are selecting folks in December, and we're hoping to launch everything in January. We expect that we'll be launching different modules about once a month. So we'd be wrapping up with the formal training sort of mid-summer, and that would give folks some time in late summer to do their one-on-one consultation. And then we would hope that following that, cities and counties would be developing RFPs for solar, and we'd be available to help with that through the end of September. And then we would like cities and counties to pay it forward after they do that, so over the next couple of months after everything's wrapped up on the training side.
Okay. We do have somebody working with the Excel Solar Rewards Community Solar Garden. Could they apply to get help with this particular project?
It's a little hard to say. If it's located on city or county land, definitely, I would say apply. If you're really thinking about hosting a community solar array. If you're just thinking about purchasing through part of that array and you don't have any other buildings or land available, I don't think you'd really get value from walking through the content on site selection and project validation and economics and financing. But we would be happy to talk to you about that project, and if you want to give me or Amy a call, we definitely have done some work through community solar and Excel's program and community solar more broadly. So there may be a better way we could help you rather than having you run through this training program that's really focused more on on-site applications.
Great. And another interesting scenario would be, would you allow an application from a group of several local governments in the same state along with an NGO that's working with them?
Yep, that would be great. I think there are definitely organizations of cities and counties who are coming together to address solar or energy or renewable energy more broadly. If you guys are already working together and meeting on a regular basis, I think it would be great to have us provide training to you guys as a group and have you walk through that process as a group. So I would definitely encourage you to apply. If you need some flexibility in filling out the application, or as you think through, do you want to have each of those cities submit a separate application or just do one bulk application? I think either of those approaches would be fine. And if you have any more questions on that, let us know.
Great. And our final question of the day is, although if anyone has any final questions, you still have a few moments to get them in because it's only we're only 44 minutes into the webinar. Let's see. Let's see. I had one more question here that we haven't answered. Well, actually, I think we've answered all of them. Probably wait one more. So, does anybody have any additional questions? Or if I didn't get to your question, you really want the answer, you can retype it.
And I will say, Amy and I are happy to answer questions by phone or email. That's why we have our contact info up there. I realize that a lot of cities and counties may be in unique circumstances, and like some of the questions we've gotten today, you may have more questions as you develop your application. So we're happy to be involved. Do you have any more that are coming in?
Yeah, as always, people are looking for ways to finance their projects, and they're wondering if there's any possibility at all for financing the actual capital.
Yeah, so unfortunately we do not have dollars to give you to deploy your projects or to be used towards buying solar equipment or anything like that. We can help you think through some other grant dollars that may be available, or structures where you can do a loan or a lease or a PPA option. So that's a good clarification. We do not have dollars for you to spend on your project, and all of the training, I guess I should also note, is free to you for your community. Yeah,
great. And how many applicants, again, will be selected?
So we'll be selecting 50 applicants from across the country.
Great. And will the online training be available for those towns not selected?
I think that it will. That's definitely my hope, is that we will have some, maybe not all of the training available to everybody. It may be that some of our core training materials are available to everyone, and then the one-on-one sessions and things like that would obviously not be available to everybody. But we definitely do want to help as many people as possible. So if you feel like you can't apply or timing's not right, there still will be some things to help you in the future.
Great. The final question that came in was kind of already answered, but again, somebody wondering about how much of a time commitment would it be if they do get selected. Are we talking about 40 hours, or is it going to be more in line of, say, 15 to 20 hours of training?
Yeah, so we sort of talked through some of this, and a little bit of it is unknown, but we will be having about 5 training modules that are about an hour to attend, as well as some sort of homework and data gathering that will go with each of those modules, and then some opportunities with each of those to ask some Q&A from an NREL expert. So just the basic training and things like that, maybe on the order of 20 hours, and then on top of that, think through how many hours you might need to gather data from your buildings folks, or have a meeting or two with your utility. Some of that is really hard for us to judge because we got a question from one city where they are the utility, so that might be really easy. It might be much harder if you are working with an investor-owned utility, or somebody that maybe is not just in the same building as you. So
terrific.
Yeah.
Thank you again for that clarification. The final question is, will this presentation be available online?
Yes, it will be available online. We will be posting the slides, and then once the recording is available, we will send that out to everybody as well.
Terrific. Thank you. And that concludes our question and answer session. Thank you, everybody, for submitting such wonderful and inquisitive questions.
Yeah, I'm really impressed by all the questions. So it sounds like there's a lot of interest. I would encourage folks to get their applications in, and if you do have any questions following this session, please let Amy or I know. But with that, I think we're all done for the day.
Yep. Thank you, Jenny and Amy, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar.